Good morning. I'll be honest, I have a little bit of nerves, not just because this is, I think, the first time officially giving the sermon, but it's Mother's Day. I'm looking out there, there's a handful of brothers and a whole lot of mothers looking at me. And I feel like there's some pressure that they're looking at me and saying, this is my day, you better deliver a good sermon. So, Lord willing, God will use me as an instrument to touch all of your hearts. But I want to tell the mothers, many mothers here, grandmothers, I think more importantly, spiritual mothers, that I love you, that I thank you for all you do, and we're going to talk about a little bit of I think the most important thing mothers do for us, and when you think of what mothers do, and the way that they love us, the way that they care for us. I think a lot of the kids, and I don't know who organized that. I don't know if it was his Sister Heather. I think many were involved, but that was a blessing to hear the kids just kind of talk about why their mothers and their grandmothers were special. And I like when they're saying that they care for me. It's so simple to them. They take care of me. They're there. They're never not there. I forget. I think it was Maverick that said we do fun things. I said Steph must be the fun mom because she got that she does fun things with me. But I think of all the things that mothers do, and I look at my wife, and I'm blessed to have her as the mother of my children, and I think of all the things she did for my daughter when she was born. And the things that, as a father, I try, but the mother there's just something special about the way that a mother takes care of their kids, especially when they're backed into a corner, or whether they have nowhere to go. Just what they do for their children. I look at Sister Brittany. We were in the hospital around the same time when she was there with Lana, and just the love that they have for their children, and I think about how they care for them on a day-to-day basis. I tend to sleep in a little bit later than my wife, and I hear about it often. And by the time I get up, the kids are already fed and they're dressed and their teeth are brushed and they're ready to go to school. And I'm getting up late, and she reminds me of that somewhat regularly. That all the natural things they do to take care of them. But there's one thing that I think they do that's most important, and we'll talk about that. Yesterday we had our area MBA business meeting, and I want to thank those that were there to support us, but just thank those that support the area MBA in general. I know it's always tough to get out to a business meeting, but I think it's more important that we show up, and sometimes that's physically, sometimes that's with donations, and sometimes just with prayers. That our activities, our auxiliaries, anything we do, especially those things aimed at the youth, have support. So I just want to thank all of you, whether you're able to show up, whether you're able to just say a prayer, but the love that you show us as your officers, but any organization in the church. And one of the themes that kind of kept coming up yesterday is we typically talk about some pretty pointed events we want to plan. Well, we just opened it up and asked for suggestions. There were a lot of suggestions of how to reach our youth, and I think one of the themes that we kept hitting on yesterday was building that foundation for our children. We talked about establishing something in their hearts when they're young. We talked about keeping that momentum going so that as they grow, that's where they're focused. They're not getting lost and trying to figure out their place, but they have a foundation in the church. And maybe we can touch them through the area MBA. Maybe we touch them through asking them to help breakfast on a Sunday morning. But little things that we can do to establish that foundation with them. And there's another way to say that, and it's something that's been on my mind, and that's what I want to talk about today. It's not just building that foundation, but it's planting a seed. We hear often there's a lot of scriptures related to plants, to seeds, to trees, different images around plants in the scriptures, and that's kind of what I want to talk about today is the seeds that are planted in our hearts. When I think about gardening, I know many brothers garden. I think Brother John, you have a nice garden. It usually goes at your house, but I always think of mothers that are taking care of their plants. They plant their garden, or they plant their flowers, or whatever that may be. And how important it is to make sure you plant that seed deep, and that you plant it in the right soil, and that you take care of it. And I was reading this week in Alma. And this is where I want to focus the scripture. I'm going to jump around a little bit. I don't plan to talk long, but in Alma chapter 32, verse that I think we hear often, he says, "But behold, if you will awake and arouse your faculties, even to an experiment upon my words, and exercise a particle of faith, yea, even if ye can no more than desire to believe, let this desire work in you, even until you believe in a manner that ye can give place for a portion of my words. And he goes on in the next verse to say, now we will compare the word unto a seed. Now if you give place, that a seed may be planted in your heart. So when I think of what the most important thing that our mothers do for us, and I'm not just talking natural, it could be spiritual, it's to plant that seed in our hearts when we're young. And it doesn't have to be when we're young. There's many that haven't met the church until they were older. You're never too old to have a seed planted in your heart. And it could be by a mother, it could be by a spiritual mother, it could be by my brothers, but it's so important that that seed is planted in your heart, because that's where it all begins. I was talking to the person who cuts my hair, and she was telling me all about her garden and all the vegetables that she's growing, and zucchinis and tomatoes and cucumbers and different herbs and things like that. And she said something that kind of stood out to me. She said, usually she'll go buy a plant, right? And go buy a tomato plant, and you transport it home, and you plant it in the earth. And she said last year she was trying to plant by seed. She said how much harder it was to grow a vegetable plant when you start from a seed versus when you start from a plant that somebody already started for you. And I was thinking about that naturally, and it's almost like a shortcut, right? You let somebody do some of the hard work, they get that seed planted, it's in the right soil, maybe they help it grow to a certain height, and then they sell it to you, and you get it home, and I'd say you're already halfway there. Now you just got to keep it going, right? You just got to keep it alive. But spiritually, no one can do that for you. No one can grow your faith to a certain degree and then hand it over to you. No one can take your trust in the Lord. No one can take your spirit and grow it for you in themselves and just hand it to you. But they have to plant that seed, and they have to plant it deep within you. And it's up to us, it says, to exercise, to experiment on that. And it goes on and talks about nourishing in this chapter. And there was some, I want to read something that a couple of the kids wrote yesterday. They did a little craft where they made something, and one of the kids wrote, thanks for planting the seeds of love in me. It was for their mothers. And I thought that's beautiful. Thanks for planting those seeds of love in me, bearing it deep in my heart. But there was another one that said, thanks for watering me to help me grow. And when I thought of that, I thought of how that love that our parents have, that our mothers have for us, how it's not just that they help get that seed in you. They don't just tell you about Jesus when you're little and then say, all right, push you out of the nest and say, go ahead and fly. But they take the time to water. They take the time to nourish us. They take the time to help us grow. And it doesn't stop. I look around at the spiritual mothers that I have. I look at Sister Terry. I remember helping plant the seed when I was little in a Sunday school class, but still there loving me, still there helping nourish me. I look at Sister Chris and all the love she gave to the young people in and out of her home. And my mother always opening the home up to the kids, spending time at Sister Joy's with Brad. The way that they loved us. But it wasn't just that they planted that seed, they kept watering us. And when it maybe looked like we were starting to die a little bit, they kept watering us and they kept nourishing us. And it goes on in here and it says, later in this chapter, let me find my spot. It says, neither must ye lay aside your faith, for you've only exercised your faith to plant the seed that ye might try the experiment. So it's saying, you already planted that seed, but that's not the end. That's just the beginning. It said, behold, as the tree beginneth to grow, ye will say, let us nourish it with great care, that it may get root, that it may grow up and bring forth fruit unto us. And now behold, if ye nourish it with much care, it will get root and grow up and bring forth fruit. And when I look around when I think of myself, I had that seed of the gospel, the seed of the message of Jesus Christ. It's talking about the word here, comparing the word to a seed. And we know in John it talks about the word was there from the beginning, and it compares the word to Jesus Christ. So we're talking about Jesus Christ here. And it says, it was planted in me, but it was nourished with great care, that it might grow up. And so I think physically, I've grown up in the church because of the nourishment and the watering that many have done for me. When I maybe found myself withering a little bit, there's many in this room and many around the church that prayed for me and loved me. But it's something that I think as you get older, you have to take that ownership on yourself. We can't just rely on others to keep nourishing us. And I think that's what took me many years, I think, to learn, is that your walk with Jesus Christ doesn't end because your mother's established something in you. It doesn't end because you attended Sunday school and they taught you the lessons. but it's something that you have to take ownership of, that you have to worry about nurturing. And it says, or what happens if you don't? It says, if you neglect the tree and take no thought for its nourishment, behold, it will not get any root. So thankfully our mothers didn't neglect us. Thankfully our brothers and sisters that loved us don't neglect us. But it goes on to say, when the heat of the sun cometh and scorcheth it, because it hath no root, it withers away, and you pluck it up and cast it out. And I love this part. It says, now it's not because the seed isn't good, neither because the fruit wasn't desirable, it was because your ground was barren. So it's putting that ownership on you. It says to try that seed. It says to plant it, experiment on it. It goes on in the verse I read earlier. I'm jumping around. It said, if it be a true seed, a good seed, and it puts the onus on you. It says, if you do not cast it out because of your unbelief, if you will not resist the Spirit of the Lord, behold, it will swell in your breast. And when you feel these swelling motions, you will begin to say within yourself, it must needs be that this is a good seed, or that the word is good. And so it's saying here, that seed that's planted within us, which is Jesus Christ, that if we, as we grow, we don't feel the goodness of that, it's not because he's not good. It promises us he's good. There's many examples of how good he is for us. But it says it's because we don't nourish it, because we didn't give it that great care. And so while I'm thankful for our mothers, my message to you is to make sure you're constantly nourishing that seed within you. But yes, hopefully it's taken root. I think that's why we're here. Maybe it's growing into a great tree, but you never stop there. One of the things we're teaching our kids is that just because you can do something once, you don't stop practicing it. A daughter that's trying gymnastics, and it took her a while to be able to land a cartwheel. She's gotten good at it, and she thinks she's mastered the cartwheel, she's done practicing it. We said that's not where it ends. You can't just stop once you think you have something figured out, because you'll start to lose that skill. It's the same way with that seed. If you don't keep nourishing it, we do that through reading the Word. We do that through fasting and prayer. We do that through gathering together with our brothers and sisters. We do that through supporting the different activities and events that we have. If you don't nourish that tree that grows inside you, it says it'll wither away. And so it goes on and says, and I'm going to wrap it up here soon, but later on in the chapter it says, if you will nourish the word, yea, nourish the tree as it beginneth to grow, by your faith with great diligence and with patience, looking forward to the fruit thereof, it shall take root. And behold, it shall be a tree springing up unto everlasting life. So that's the goal. That's the punchline, right? Is that tree that's within us, that seed that's growing, if we continue to nourish it, it'll continue to spring up unto that everlasting life. And it says, because of your diligence and your faith and your patience with the word in nourishing it, that it may take root in you. Behold, by and by ye shall pluck the fruit thereof, which is the most precious, which is sweet above all that is sweet, which is white above all that is white. So it's talking about something that is just better than anything else. It says, and pure above all that is pure, and ye shall feast upon this fruit, even till ye are filled, that ye hunger not, neither shall ye thirst. It says, then, my brethren, ye shall reap the rewards of your faith, and your diligence, and your patience, and your long-suffering, waiting for the tree to bring forth fruit unto you. So, it talks about some things that might be difficult. Began with talking about experimenting on that faith. But it takes diligence, and it takes patience, and it takes things that might be uncomfortable. When I think about mothers, and I think about, I mentioned the way that my wife cared for our children when they were born. There's diligence there. There's times where you don't want to do it. There's times where you have to have patience because you're not seeing the results that you want to see. And I think of how God's patience for us is everlasting. I can tell you, if he didn't exercise patience with us and long suffering towards me, I wouldn't be up here. He would have given up on me. He would have said, that plant's no good. He would have ripped it out and cast it aside. But for us, we see that the results of that patience that we have in the Lord, of that diligence we have in the Lord, and the rewards of that faith, it's a tree that brings forth fruit. And I'm going to circle back and read the end of the verse I started with. It It says, if that begins to swell in your breast, it says, it must needs be that this is a good seed, or that the word is good. For it beginneth to enlarge my soul, yet beginneth to enlighten my understanding, yet beginneth to be delicious to me. It's a unique phrase. I'm not sure if that word is anywhere else in the scriptures, but I like that phrase of that word becomes delicious to you. So when I was thinking of my hairdresser was talking about how much more delicious the vegetables were that she grows in her garden. She said that's why she does it. It takes the time and the effort, but when she eats those tomatoes or that cucumber, that it just tastes more delicious. And my prayer for you today, and I think the message I'd like you to take away is that to nourish the seed that's been put in within you, to do the things that we mentioned, to pray, to fast, to attend, to read, and do it to the point where it becomes delicious to you. I know that when something is delicious to me, and my wife will give me a hard time, I can't stop eating it, no matter how bad it is for me or how much my stomach hurts. Went out to breakfast yesterday. I got a meal, and I got a side of a pancake that was about this big, and it was too delicious to stop eating it. And I got home, and I was sick, and I had to lay down, and I had to take a nap. And maybe naturally that's not a good thing, but spiritually you can't eat too much of the Word. You can't overindulge yourself when it comes to the Word of God, when it comes to the spiritual things that He has for us. And so I ask you that you would continue that experiment, that you would continue to read, that we would continue to learn more about Christ, that you would continue to strengthen and nourish your walk with Him, and that the Word would become delicious to you. And maybe it's something that you can't put down. Maybe it's something that you have too much of. Maybe you need a nap even at times, but that's okay. But that's my message for you today, is that the seeds that have been planted within us, and I thank the mothers who have done that. I can personally thank so many in this room that helped plant that seed in me and helped water and nourish it. But I thank Jesus Christ for His patience for me, as it took me some years to learn how to nourish it myself. And so let's take care of the seed that's been put within us. Let's take care of that plant, that it would grow into a big tree, and that we would be able to partake of the fruit that comes out of that. So I love you all very much. I pray that God will continue to bless you as we continue this meeting, that the Word would continue. I'm looking forward to hearing your testimonies as well, and just may God bless you.
Trying to find a song, and my brother Josh is going to find it, but it's on Christ the solid rock I stand. I don't know if no one knows that number off the top of their head. Oh, my hope is good. Okay.
That's 55.
All right, we're gonna sing that in just a minute. I'm not going to speak long. I was really enjoying the words of our brother, and there was a scene that came to my mind, and I just wanted to share it with you. So our brother was presenting, the 32nd chapter of Alma, one of my favorites, because it's just so simple. It's amazing. God wants us to understand the gospel, this great mystery. So He breaks it down in these ways that we can physically see the idea of this seed and receiving it into us, and how it grows up. And I wanted to reference something real quickly. It's the 8th chapter of Mark. And this is during Christ's ministry, and He's going about, and He's traveling, and He's preaching, and He's doing many healings as He goes, performing these miracles. And in the 22nd verse it says, "And He cometh to Bethsaida, He being Christ, and they bring a blind man unto Him, and besought Him to touch Him. And He took the blind by the hand, and led him out of the town. And when He had spit on his eyes, and put His hands upon him, He asked him if he saw aught." So Christ gets this spittle and puts it on the man's face, and then He says, "All right, you were blind, now can you see?" And it says, "And he looked up, and he said, I see men as trees walking." And after that, Christ put his hands on his eyes again, and he was fully restored. And we know it was not Christ trying, failing, and trying again. This is God in the flesh. Everything he does for a purpose. And there's not much in this chapter. It doesn't go on to say why that happened or how it happened that way. It's open to a little bit of interpretation. But our brother did point out how many times in Scripture we hear of trees, seed, vine, this growth. And it says specifically that this man was given a type of vision where he saw men as trees. And you think about that for just a moment, and the words that our brother shared with us of if we would nourish and grab hold of the gospel, the seed, or if we would neglect it, how it would change our lives. And I'm sure you come across people in your lives that you meet them, and if they were a tree, they would be barren. They would have no leaves. They'd be hard. They would be thorny. They're living this empty life because they have not found Christ. And what opportunity that we have. And if you were looked upon as a tree, what would you look like? I want to thank God for my mother, and the blessing that she was in, throughout my life, not only just raising me and providing for me, but, you think about the way a mother looks upon a child. And I had some challenges when I was little. I got very sick when I was little. I had a speech impediment when I was young. I really struggled with reading. They wanted to hold me back in the 3rd grade. But my mother looked upon me and she saw this perfect, beautiful tree. Even as a little sapling, she saw this picture of what I could be. And I think that's how Christ looks at us, of the beautifulness that he wants us, and he begs us that we would take hold of what he wants for us, that we would put it in our hearts, that we would nourish it, that we would come together in fellowship, that we would praise his name, that we'd read his word, that we'd grow up to something perfect. Because you think of a tiny little seed and what it grows into by the love of God. And I stand here today as someone that thank God I've been very blessed in my life. There's nothing I can take credit for. And I owe so much to my natural mother, to my spiritual mothers, because they saw a beautiful tree within me when I was struggling in school, when I was struggling spiritually, when I didn't want to come to church, when I wasn't living the life that I should. I'm thankful that they kept, as our brother said, kept watering, kept nourishing, kept digging about, as it says in the Word. So I'm grateful for all the blessings in my life, and I'm going to put Brother Ricky on the spot to start us with testimony, ask him to share a few thoughts, and then we're going to open it up to everyone. So please prepare in your mind a few words to share with one another to maybe honor our mothers, but most of all to give God the praise.